Hello everyone, and welcome to Ful-on, your Fulham-centric football podcast. I'm your host, Ash Woolford. Joining me today for our Leeds United preview are both the Jack, starting with Mozza. Long time no see, mate. Welcome back. Hope you're good. Hope you had a good Christmas. New Year.
Thank you very much, and to you both. Yeah, it's nice to be back for my first full-on pod of 2026, and yes, I am ecstatic.
And also joining us, obviously, is AJ. AJ, how you doing, mate?
I'm good as gold now that I know for a fact that we're not a curse.
Yeah, it's been a good couple of weeks for Fulham. Obviously, we are going into the game on Saturday against Leeds United. Uh, Hopefully, full of a lot of confidence, considering what has been a quite difficult period for the club in terms of player availability, be that AFCON or injuries. We've actually weathered the storm of late pretty well. We put in some decent performances during that period as well. Unbeaten in six, it's very, very good at the moment down at the Cottage. And what makes it even better is we're looking good away from home against teams that are quite tricky to play against as well, which will suit us well going into a game at Ellen Road, which is never easy, always difficult when you play against a Leeds team. Definitely always difficult when you have to go to Ellen Road. It is a formidable place to go to. AJ, I ask you this question every week. We always start with this one, obviously. Um, News coming out today about possible player availability. Some players may be returning to the squad this weekend, uh, but we're not 100% sure whether or not we're going to see Josh King back or not as available to be picked. What are your thoughts on the starting 11? I'm assuming you're going to go with we're going to make a lot of changes from the FA Cup game last week, but what are your general thoughts for this game?
I don't even know whether or not we've got the availability to make a lot of changes from that FA Cup game. To be honest, we get to make a couple of changes in the sense of we've got a left back in Robinson that will be able to come on. We've got Wilson who'll be able to go back to his starting position. We've got Raul who will come back in again to manage his minutes. But outside of that, it's probably going to be a lot more of the same. I suppose Harrison Reed probably gets dropped, although I don't think he's put a foot wrong since he's come back in. So it's a strange one. Yeah, there'll be changes, but not any in the significant roles, if that makes sense. And the AFCON boys won't yet be back because they have a third place playoff to play still.
Yeah, it's a bit of an odd one that I expect changes, but they're not necessarily changes that are glowing because of how dilapidated the squad is at the moment. Going with that, Mozza, it's the 15th of January as we record this, right? Obviously, 16th when this show comes out for everyone to watch. We've still not signed a single player in this January transfer window. We were speaking about it the other week about the potential that the results have paved over a few of the cracks in the squad have meant that we've not panic bought any players in. But it's still slightly concerning that, we're 15, 16 days into the month and this very small squad that's very clearly needs help and needs to be boosted hasn't had any players signed yet.
Yeah, I've become desensitized to it now, really, or unsurprised. And I'm not a suspicious person, but I'm starting to think, well, is it better that we don't actually bring anyone in? Obviously, it's not. I'd love to sign someone as long as it's not a loan player from the likes of Chelsea, for example, like we've had many times in the past. But yeah, as you both said, I don't know how long we've got. What I'm trying to say is I think our luck's going to run out very soon, and I think we're going to be dealing with the consequences of it. I think we have had some lucky results over the Christmas period, but Leeds have been getting some good results. And also, of course, the boys at AFCON. Now Nigeria aren't in the tournament, although they still have to have this third place playoff match. It all seems like everything is going to go against us, even though some of those things I think would be positive. Like, I'm dying to see Bassi and Chukwueze and Iwobi back. But I mean, what do you guys think? Is it safe? I think it's fairly safe to say we're not going to be in a relegation battle this season. But all of the things that are happening now, or rather, nothing that's happening now, I think is really going to, seal our fate ahead of the next season. Who knows? It's always just hope for the best, expect the worst, really. I did see that we were possibly going to sign someone. I can't remember the fella's name. My apologies from earlier, not doing my research properly and writing his name down. Can one of you remind me of the guy's name, or maybe I just dreamt it?
We've been linked with a few players and apparently put bids in, so it doesn't really help that you might have thought of him. There's no.
He had a hyphen in his name.
Yeah, well, be careful what you wish for, Mozza, because we've been linked back with Ruben Loftus-Cheek of recent.
No, that's not the fella I'm thinking of. I'm just trying to look it up. But anyway, well, look, if I can't see it at the moment, my point is, well, we're all saying it, aren't we? Like, no one's come in. Let's just see what happens.
Yeah, it's worrying. It's worrying because we all know desperately the squad needs it. We know Marco wants it. You know, we need to improve certain positions. You know, my concern is that we have managed to, by hook or by crook, get ourselves through this really difficult Christmas New Year period. And now our players are starting to come back to being fit again. That the club will see that as Marco's got a boost of players there that he hasn't had in recent weeks, which is worrying, you know, because we're not just looking at this squad potentially looking up. We're looking up now at the moment, right? Let's be honest. These set of results have got us all quite positive. We should be looking up at the table and potentially getting into Europe, not over our shoulder and looking down at relegation. I think we're helped by the fact that there is now a sizable chunk between us and that relegation zone. But we have to remember only 6 games ago, we were all desperately worried about how close that, you know, that drop zone was to us. And, you know, this is the league at the moment. The league's very, very close in the middle of the pack. You know, from 15th to 5th is what, 3 points separating, 4 points separating everyone. You know, we win 2 games in a row, we're looking at being maybe 5th in the table. You know, we lose 2 games in a row, you're looking at being 17th, and that's slightly. Yeah, there you go. Like, it's very, very tight at the moment. So we have to be, you know, be careful. And that's why it's sort of interesting to me that the club aren't hedging their bets and sort of bringing some players in that are going to help Marco do that. What concerns me, and AJ, this brings me to you because it was a question I was going to ask you. Over the last 2 years, we've all very vocally made the point about Fulham's drop off at the end of the seasons, right? And the season before last, it was 2 months for the end of the season. Last year, it was basically February. We just completely stopped playing football. Is there a real concern that with the squad being pushed as much as it is, that this year that will happen, and it won't be because of effort, it will just be because everyone's completely dead on their feet?
There's a risk of it, but I don't think there's as big of a risk because normally we start the season really well and we've already got to a good point range by this point of the season, but from absolutely burning ourselves out, grinding out results from September onwards. However, in this case, we were pretty poor from September through to November. And because of that, and having a flying December, we've still got quite a lot in the tank, or at least I feel there's still a lot in the tank when it comes to watching the players. It doesn't look like we're grinding results anymore as much as we're comfortably getting them, which is something that I haven't been able to say for a long time. And I mentioned at the beginning of the season, when was the last time we saw Fulham be comfortable? And at the moment, that's something it looks like we are. We know when to shift through the gears, when to put on more pressure, when to try and go for more goals. And it's nice to be in control for a change.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think that performances have definitely been tight of late in the sense of there've been some really difficult games. As bad as West Ham are being, it's still difficult to go get results at the London Stadium. The Liverpool home game I think has been we look really good even though we come out of a draw. Contentious goal that we conceded and then having to score last minute equaliser makes that game a bit more dramatic than it actually was in terms of how we played. I think the game that sort of shows the resilience that we have at the moment is actually the Man City loss because you look at the game and you know that half time we were well out of it, but that one goal we got from Emil Smith Rowe just for half time, and you never say never. We concede quickly in the second half, but the lads don't give up. I think there's a lot of fighting spirit within the squad. There's a lot of players that are desperate to get over the line this year and actually make it into Europe after 2 seasons of being exceptionally close to Europe, to the point where 2 years ago the word Europe was banned. The players weren't allowed to were not even allowed to mention it in media. Every time they were asked about it, they had to basically nonchalantly push it off and say that we're not thinking about it. Last year they did dare to speak about it, and we're aware of how much we fell off a cliff in February, and then missed out because of it. We sort of put our eggs in the FA Cup box, didn't we? And it didn't come out as it should have done. For us this year, confidence has been quite high of late, which is good for the players that have been around. It's good. You look at Tom Cairney, who's on the periphery; his confidence is going to be sky high because of a couple of really good performances. You look at Harry Wilson, you know, who at the beginning of the season was on the margins of the team. He weren't really starting, was he? And now look at him; he's probably the envy of the league in the sense of players performing. And then you've got to look at Raul Jimenez, who, yes, he's not scoring loads of goals, and we'll talk about Leeds in a minute because Dominic Calvin-Lewin is probably an ideal sort of counterweight for him at the moment in terms of they've both been putting in performances all year long. Rail's not scoring a ton of goals, but the work he's doing for the team has been hero-like, considering the fact that we got no options other than a young striker who's inexperienced and is not really fancied by the manager. It's one of those things that the squad at the moment is putting in performances that way outweigh its ability, if that makes sense. Like, I think there's been a lot of talk about certain players that need replacing, certain players that probably aren't putting performances in, but every single one of those players over the Christmas period have had a game where they've fully proven their need for their place in the squad. That's the weird thing. It now gets to the point where the AFCON boys will be back halfway through next week, so they should potentially be available for the Brighton and Hove Albion game on the 24th of January. But I don't think any of them are guaranteed to get their spots back. Calvin Bassey, who has been absolutely superb during this AFCON, and last night in their semi-final was superb, considering he got yellow carded earlier on in the game, rather unfair, and they would have missed the final anyway. He was brilliant. But he's not guaranteed his space when he comes back because Cuenca has been superb. You look at Iwobi,
There's
who, well, he'll probably play because Marco Silva's rule, isn't it? Like, he has to play him, it doesn't matter what. But Chukwueze is going to struggle to get back in the team, and we have to look at that. These are positive things that players are coming back and they're not guaranteed their spots back again because it means the rest of the squad have stepped up, right? So that's ultimately what we need. But AJ, we spoke about it last week about there's certain positions that we really do need recruitment in. For you, is there at the moment any glaring spots that we have to fill in sooner rather than later? No wait until the end of January for a possible bargain. We have to get a player in to make sure that we're giving ourselves the best chance of getting performances out of the squad.
I think if it's genuinely pushing for Europe, we need another left winger. But if it's just in terms of managing the squad to ensure we don't fall off a cliff, we need another central defensive midfielder. and an actual ball-winning central defensive midfielder to ease some of the pressure off of the defence and to cause less injuries to our back line towards the end of the season. But if we're wanting to push for Europe, we need another left winger as well to support Kevin, because realistically, Kevin's just scored his first goal. He should be in a lot of confidence and it should push on now. But God forbid something happens to him. We're looking at playing Emil Smith Rowe at left wing and having to bring King in central midfield. Not the worst thing in the world, but we suddenly lose a ton of pace on the outlet and a ton of trickery. So having another direct option like Wilson, like Chukwueze, that can play out on that left wing. And yes, I know what people will say. Well, we've got Chukwueze, we can play him out on the left. Marco Silva's not going to play a left-footed player out on the left. He's just not going to do it. Same reason we don't see Sessegnon in that left wing. He wants someone that's inverted. So we're going to need somebody for that role.
Yeah, ultimately, we don't want to be in a position where we have to see Alex Iwobi out there again. As good as Alex Iwobi is, and as much as I like Alex Iwobi, putting him out on the left wing really does him a disservice, because he's such a good player through the middle of the park that he needs to be in the middle of the pitch, not out on the wing, because that's where he does the most damage. That's where he controls games. And I think it's been proven during AFCON as well with Nigeria that it's where he pulls the strings, right? And ultimately, that's where, if he's going to be playing, that's where you want him to play. Lads, let's do what we always do with these match previews. Players to watch from both from both squads, please, and a scoreline prediction. I know Leeds potentially bought a couple of players in over the last couple of weeks. They bought in one today from Chelsea. Well, actually from Brighton, but who'd been at Chelsea, who's potentially going to be straight into the lineup on Saturday. But I'll start with you, Mozza. Can I have a couple of players to watch from both teams, please, and a scoreline prediction?
Yes, mate. I'm just going to base it off really of some of the things you mentioned about not to quote you or that it's in writing or anything. When you mentioned about every player in the squad has shown their worth over this Christmas period to earn their place. I don't quite agree like that every player has. I mean, obviously we're probably not counted likes of Adama Traore, although I thought he actually had a decent performance in at the end in the last one or two games for the minutes that he was on. But I've been impressed by some people. Like I love how much of a good season Emil Smith Rowe is having. And we were saying even before this season started, he just needs to build his confidence. And I feel like that is being shown. I still don't think he's obviously not the finished article, but he will be the one that I want to watch for the game ahead of us. And I think obviously, I hope he will be starting. On the flip side of that, just to say as well, Kevin, I've became really sort of disillusioned with him. He looked like disenchanted himself being on the pitch after joining us after a couple of games. But I think AJ said as well, he got that goal to build his confidence. So yeah, those are my two sort of ones to watch. I am worried about our midfield. I'm worried about Berge and Lukic. I think Berge's really dropped off. I'm not too sure what's going on. I'm sorry, I don't want to be negative Nelly and all that, but I just think some players have dropped off that I didn't expect to. I'm not sure why that is. I do think there is still a fighting spirit there, but I'm not sure if everyone is fully committed, but maybe it's because they don't know if Silva himself is committed to Fulham and yada, yada, yada. Anyway, that's me going around the houses with that bit. And you mentioned Dominic Calvert-Lewin for Leeds. He is the one that I'll say I think any sort of opposition, really, to be honest, any striker of any side that we play is always someone to keep your eye on, especially with all this, I keep saying it, all the back passing play that we do, which has worked out for us. We're seeing less of it, but I still think our defence is very shaky. And the amount of times the ball gets passed back to Leno and he's leaving it too long and taking the risk for him to be chased down by the opposition striker. Yeah. But what do I know? I did not expect us to be where we are in the table at this point in 2026. And as Drew once famously said as well, I haven't got my UEFA coaching badges. So I'm happy to be proven wrong as always.
Scoreline prediction.
Scoreline prediction, bugging me. Forgot about that. I've got a horrible feeling, but 1-0 Leeds.
1-0 Leeds. Okay, I think it's a fair shout. I think it's going to be a difficult game. So, it's not unrealistic to have this game be quite a low scoring one. I don't see it being a high scoring one myself, but we'll talk about that in a sec. AJ, how about yourself, buddy? A couple of players to watch from both teams and a scoreline prediction, please.
I think it's the wingers to watch in this one. It'll be Harry Wilson for us and Brendan Aronson for Leeds. He's in great goal scoring form off the back of a couple of really stellar performances, and he's the sort of player we typically should have to worry about. Scoreline prediction: I'm gonna say 2-2, purely because Leeds have managed to draw 5 of their last 7 Premier League games, and it'd be very typical to do the same against us.
First Desmond of 2026. There you go. That's the first prediction of the year. So I think for me, look, players to watch. Realistically, for Leeds, it's Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Brendan Harrison. They've both been on form of late. They've both been really playing well in the Leeds' last few games. If anybody watched the Leeds Newcastle game, they were really unlucky in that game in the sense of some of the goals they conceded. But they're weak defensively, and they, like us, look nervous almost every time a team presses them. So, we have to look at that as something that we might be able to exploit, especially with our Fulham players to watch for me, which is obviously going to be Harry Wilson, just because the boy is in such form at the moment that it's impossible not to talk about him as a player to watch. And Kevin, who finally got his goal last week, and I think getting that goal will take some of the pressure off of him that he puts on himself when he's attacking. And because of that, we might see a bit more fluidity in his end product. So, I think that this one weirdly could be a low scoring game, could be a 1-0, 2-1 game, but it also could be another one of those games that finishes 4-3, which is absolutely shocking to say out loud when if anyone was at the Cottage who watched the Fulham Leeds game at the Cottage, because that was dire in front of goal, and it took a worldie of an own goal for us to get the 3 points. So, it is what it is. It'll be quite difficult. Ultimately, anyone going up to the game on Saturday, enjoy Ellen Road. It's always a great place to go to. It is one of those stadiums that can be very, very boisterous and very, very difficult to play in as an away team. And hopefully, we don't sort of shrink under the pressure of being there. We haven't the last couple of times we've been there, which has been good. Hopefully, we can put in another sort of performance like we have done in the last couple of weeks, and extend this unbeaten run to 7 games, which would be, from a Fulham point of view, absolutely brilliant, and would be another notch in Marco Silva proving he is actually a genius. Ideally, on the back of that, by proving that, he'll also get back to the transfer window. We might see some players through the door, before next week, but we shall see. Lads, thank you very much for joining me. Have a good weekend. I'll see you both early next week to review this game, hopefully with 3 points in the bag, us still smiling and being super positive about what has been a whirlwind of a Christmas and New Year period for Fulham. Not really much more to say, is there, other than come on, you Whites.